Clara McAllister pressed her dead husband's ledger against her chest and ran. Behind her, redstone burned orange under the July moon. Ahead, nothing but 6 miles of darkness and a man who had sworn to help no one. She ran anyway. Because the men who killed Thomas were coming. Because the evidence in her hands could destroy the most powerful man in Texas. And because Clara McAllister had spent 8 months being a quiet widow. Tonight she was done being quiet. If stories about women who refuse to break speak to something in you, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far a story like this can travel. The horse died 2 miles from Samuel Garrett's ranch. Clara felt it stumble first. Then the terrible sideways lurch. Then the ground coming up fast and hard and unforgiving. She hit the dirt road with her shoulder and rolled, clutching the saddlebag to her body, the way a mother clutches a child. The ledger. The map. Thomas's handwriting. She checked the bag before she checked herself, everything intact. She allowed herself one breath of relief before the pain in her shoulder announced itself properly. The mare lay on its side chest, heaving foam at its mouth. Clara crawled to it and put her hand on its neck and felt the rapid failing pulse beneath her palm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She had pushed too hard. She had known she was pushing too hard. But the alternative was stopping, and stopping meant dying. And Clara McAllister had not survived 8 months of grief and suspicion and slow-building terror just to die on a dirt road 4 miles from the man who murdered her husband. The horse's breathing slowed, then stopped. Clara stood. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her shoulder throbbed. The summer night pressed against her skin like a fever, hot and close even at this hour. 4 more miles. She started walking. Samuel Garrett heard the knock at 3 a.m. and did not answer it. He lay in his bed in the dark and listened to the sound repeat itself. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Someone who wanted to be heard but was too tired or too scared to pound. He didn't move. The knocking stopped. Footsteps on his porch. Then, silence. Sam closed his eyes and waited for whoever it was to leave. They didn't leave. He heard the creak of the porch boards, the soft thud of someone sitting down. And then nothing. Just the cicadas and the heat and the particular quality of quiet that meant someone was out there waiting. He gave it 10 minutes. 15. At 20 minutes he got up, pulled on his boots, and took the rifle from above the door. The woman on his porch didn't flinch when he opened the door with a gun in his hands. She looked up at him from where she sat with her back against the railing, and her face was pale and dirt-streaked and utterly without fear. "Mr. Garrett," she said. Her voice was steady. "I apologize for the hour. Get off my property." "I can't do that." Sam studied her, late 20s, widow's black, though the dress was torn and filthy now. A saddlebag clutched in her lap, like it contained something precious. Dark circles under her eyes that spoke of weeks without proper sleep. He recognized the type. Trouble wrapped in desperation, asking for help he had no intention of giving. "I don't know who told you to come here," he said. "But they were wrong. I don't take in strays. I don't involve myself in other people's problems. And I don't have whatever it is you're looking for." "I'm not looking for anything," she said. "I'm running from something. There's a difference." "Not to me there isn't." She stood then slowly, and he saw her wince as she put weight on her left leg. Something wrong there, twisted ankle maybe, or worse. "My name is Clara McAllister," she said. "My husband was Thomas McAllister. He worked at the Morrison Mining Company in Redstone until 8 months ago when he died in what they called a cave-in. I don't care. He was murdered, Mr. Garrett." Sam's expression didn't change. "Still don't care." Clara reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. She held it up so he could see it in the moonlight. "This is his handwriting," she said. "Names, dates, land purchases that never went through proper channels, payments to county officials, bribes to surveyors, and at the center of all of it, Judge Howard Mercer. Something flickered in Sam's eyes, just for a moment. Then it was gone. "Judge Mercer is a respected man," he said flatly. "Judge Mercer is a murderer and a thief," Clara said. "And in about 4 hours, when his men realize I'm not in Redstone anymore, they're going to start looking for me. When they find me, they'll kill me and burn this ledger, and everything my husband died for will disappear." She took a step toward him, toward Danator. He didn't step back, but his grip on the rifle tightened. "I'm not asking you to fight," she said. "I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking for one night. Let me rest until dawn. Then I'll be gone and you can go back to whatever it is you're doing out here alone. What I'm doing out here alone is none of your concern." "You're right. It isn't." She met his eyes directly. "So, we're even. What I'm running from is none of yours." They stood like that for a long moment. The night pressed in around them thick with heat and the sound of insects. "One night," Sam said finally. "You sleep in the barn. At first light, you're gone." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing you a kindness. I'm getting you off my porch so I can go back to sleep." He turned and went inside without another word. The door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in the darkness, holding her dead husband's evidence, and allowed herself exactly 5 seconds to feel the exhaustion she had been holding at bay for hours. Then she walked to the barn. She didn't sleep. She tried. She lay on a pile of hay in the corner of Sam Garrett's barn with the saddlebag under her head and her eyes closed. But every time she started to drift, she heard Thomas's voice. "They're going to find out, Clara. They're going to find out what I know, and when they do," she had told him he was being paranoid. She had told him to let it go, to stop digging, to think about their future instead of someone else's crimes. She had been wrong, and he had died. And she had spent 8 months telling herself that his death was an accident, until the night she finally opened the locked drawer in his desk and found the ledger. That was 3 days ago. 3 days of reading his notes. 3 days of understanding page by page the scope of what he had uncovered. 3 days of realizing that the cave-in that killed him had been too convenient, too perfectly timed, too neatly explained. 3 days of planning. She had taken the ledger to the sheriff first, Sheriff Dale Connor, a man she had known for years, a man who had attended Thomas's funeral and held her hand and told her how sorry he was. He had listened to her entire story. He had looked at every page of evidence, and then he had looked at her with something cold behind his eyes and said, "Mrs. McAllister, I think you should go home and rest. Grief does strange things to people." She had understood then. The sheriff was Mercer's man. The whole town was Mercer's town. That night, someone had tried to break into her house. Clara had been ready. She had taken the ledger and the mare and the few dollars she had hidden in her mattress, and she had run. Ruth Holloway, the only person in Redstone she trusted, had told her once about Samuel Garrett, a former ranger, a man who had walked away from everything, a man who, Ruth said with something careful in her voice, had his own reasons to hate Judge Mercer. Ruth hadn't explained those reasons, and Clara hadn't asked, but she had remembered the name and the location. 6 miles east of Redstone, at the end of a road nobody traveled anymore. Now she was here, in a stranger's barn, with evidence that could bring down the most powerful man in the territory. And the stranger wanted nothing to do with her. Clara sat up and pulled the ledger from the saddlebag. She opened it to a page near the back, one she had read so many times the words were burned into her memory. Property Transfer, Section 14, Block 7. Previous owner, Margaret Garrett. Transfer date, March 3, 1875. Authorized by Judge H. Mercer. Margaret Garrett. Clara didn't know who Margaret Garrett was. Wife maybe? Sister? Mother? But the date, March 1875, was circled 3 times in Thomas's handwriting. And next to it, he had written a single word. suspicious. She closed the ledger and pressed it against her chest. In a few hours the sun would rise. Sam Garrett would send her away, and she would have to figure out her next move alone, unless she could convince him that this fight was his too. Sam didn't sleep either. He sat in the chair by the window in his darkened bedroom and watched the barn and thought about Judge Howard Mercer. 4 years. It had been 4 years since Margaret's death. 4 years since Sam had come home from a ranger assignment to find his sister's ranch sold, her belongings scattered, and her body in a grave no one would tell him the location of. Natural causes, they said. Fever, they said. These things happen out here, they said. But Margaret had been healthy. Margaret had been strong. Margaret had written him a letter 3 weeks before she died, saying she was worried, saying someone had been pressuring her to sell, saying she thought someone was watching her. He had received that letter 2 days after her funeral. He had asked questions. He had demanded answers. He had pushed and prodded and threatened until it became clear that no one in Redstone intended to tell him the truth, and that continuing to push would get him killed the same way Margaret had been killed. So he had stopped. He had walked away from the Rangers, bought a ranch as far from town as he could manage, built a life around not caring about anything except the fence line and the cattle and the slow, predictable rhythm of days that asked nothing of him. He had made peace with it, or something that felt enough like peace to let him sleep at night. And now this woman, this widow with her ledger and her evidence and her steady, unafraid eyes, had walked onto his porch and spoken a name he had been trying to forget for 4 years. Judge Howard Mercer. Sam watched the barn door and thought about what Clara McAllister had said. Land purchases that never went through proper channels. Payments to county officials. Margaret's land had been sold 3 days after her death. Sam had never found out who bought it or how or why the sale had happened so fast. He had never found out because he had stopped looking. Because looking meant fighting, and fighting meant caring, and caring meant losing, and he had already lost enough. Property Transfer Section 14, Block 7. He didn't need to see the ledger to know what Section 14, Block 7 was. It was Margaret's ranch. Sam stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the barn, where a woman he didn't know was sitting with evidence that might contain the truth he had spent 4 years running from. He could send her away at dawn. That was the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing he had promised himself he would always do. But Margaret's voice was in his head now, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she used to tell him he couldn't save everyone, and he used to tell her he could damn well try. You can't save everyone, Sam. He had believed that finally. He had made himself believe it. But maybe he could save one. Clara was standing outside the barn when Sam approached at first light. She had washed her face in the horse trough and done what she could with her hair, and she stood straight despite the exhaustion written in every line of her body. She was ready to argue, he could see that. Ready to fight for more time, more help, more anything. He spoke before she could. I want to see the ledger. She blinked. Whatever she had prepared to say died on her lips. You want the ledger, the one you showed me last night. He held out his hand. I want to read it. Clara didn't move. Last night you didn't care. Last night I was tired and you were a stranger on my porch and I wanted you gone. He kept his hand extended. This morning I'm asking to see it. Why? Because you mentioned a name, and I have questions about that name. Questions I stopped asking a long time ago. He paused. Maybe I shouldn't have stopped. Clara studied him the way he had studied her the night before, looking for the lie, the angle, the trap. He let her look. He had nothing to hide. Not from this. Finally, she reached into the saddlebag and handed him the ledger. Their fingers touched briefly as the book passed between them. Her hand was cold, despite the heat. Sam opened the ledger and began to read. An hour later, he closed it. He sat on the porch steps with the ledger in his lap and said nothing for a long time. Clara sat beside him, not touching, not speaking, just waiting. Section 14, Block 7, he said finally. You know it. It was my sister's ranch. His voice was flat, controlled. She died 4 years ago. They told me it was fever. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm sorry. Don't be. He looked at her. Your husband wrote suspicious next to the transfer date. What did he know? I don't know everything he knew. He kept some things to himself to protect me, I think. She paused. But I know he believed that land was taken illegally, that the deaths were connected. Deaths. Plural. There are 6 property transfers in that ledger that happened within days of the previous owner dying. All of them authorized by Judge Mercer. All of them in areas where Morrison Mining wanted to expand. Sam looked out at the horizon. The sun was fully up now, beating down on the dry grass, turning the world gold and brown and merciless. Your husband was going to expose him. Yes. And Mercer found out. Yes. And now you're the one with the evidence. Yes. Sam turned the ledger over in his hands. Thomas McAllister's handwriting. Dates and names and numbers that added up to something monstrous. And Margaret's name right there on page 47. They'll come looking for you, he said. I know. They'll come here. Probably. And when they do, they won't just take the ledger, they'll kill you. And anyone standing near you. Clara met his eyes. I know that too. Sam stood up. He walked to the porch railing and gripped it hard enough that his knuckles went white. 4 years of running. 4 years of not caring. 4 years of telling himself that justice was someone else's problem. And here it was sitting on his porch steps in a torn black dress, asking him nothing and offering him everything. You can't stay here, he said. Clara's face didn't change. I understand. You didn't let me finish. He turned to face her. You can't stay here because here is the first place they'll look. But I know somewhere else. Somewhere they won't think to check. For the first time since she had arrived, something shifted in Clara's expression. Something that might have been hope, or might have been fear, or might have been both at once. Why? She asked. Why what? Why help me? Last night you wanted me gone. You've spent 4 years avoiding exactly this kind of trouble. Why change now? Sam looked at her for a long moment. Because my sister's name is in that ledger, he said quietly. Because I stopped asking questions when I should have kept asking. Because a man I've never met, your husband, kept digging when I gave up, and he died for it. And the least I can do is make sure his death meant something. He paused. And because you walked 4 miles in the dark with a twisted ankle and evidence that could get you killed, and you didn't give up. You didn't stop. Something flickered in his expression. I used to know someone like that. I used to be someone like that. Clara stood up slowly. She walked to where he stood and stopped an arm's length away. This isn't going to be simple, she said. I know. Mercer has the sheriff. He has money. He has men. He has the whole town. I know. He'll burn this ranch to the ground before he lets that ledger reach anyone who matters. Sam looked at her with something hard and old and unbroken in his eyes. Let him try, he said. They rode double on Sam's horse. Clara pressed against his back with the saddlebag clutched between them. Neither spoke. The heat was already brutal even this early, and the dust rose in clouds behind them as Sam pushed the animal hard toward the eastern ridge. Clara's shoulder burned where she had landed the night before. Her ankle throbbed with every jolt of the horse's stride. But she said nothing about either, because complaining would not make them heal faster, and would only confirm whatever opinion Sam Garrett had already formed about her. She suspected that opinion was not particularly high. After an hour of riding, Sam pulled the horse to a stop near a dry creek bed and dismounted without warning. Clara barely caught herself before sliding off after him. We walk from here, he said, taking the horse's reins. The cabin's another mile up, but the path's too narrow for riding. What cabin? One nobody knows about. He started walking. My sister built it, back when she thought she might need somewhere to disappear to. Clara followed, limping slightly on her bad ankle. She knew she was in danger. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how wrong until it was too late. Sam didn't look back at her. I didn't believe her when she told me. Thought she was being dramatic. Women's nerves, I called it. The bitterness in his voice was old and deep and well-worn. That wasn't your fault, Clara said. I didn't say it was. You didn't have to. He stopped walking then and turned to face her. His expression was hard to read in the harsh morning light. You don't know anything about me, Mrs. McAllister. Don't pretend you do. I know you blame yourself for something you couldn't have prevented. I know that because I do the same thing every single day. She met his eyes without flinching. Thomas told me he was in danger. I told him to stop digging, to let it go, to think about our future instead of other people's problems. She paused. He listened to me, Mr. Garrett. For 3 weeks he stopped, and then he started again because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't. And they killed him for it. Her voice cracked just slightly. So don't tell me I don't understand guilt. I wrote the book on it. Sam looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his face, not softening exactly, but a kind of recognition. Sam, he said finally. What? Call me Sam. If we're going to be hiding in a cabin together, Mr. Garrett is going to get old fast. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Clara, she said. He nodded once and turned back to the path. They walked the rest of the way in silence. The cabin was small, barely more than one room, but it was solid and well hidden in a fold of the ridge that made it invisible from below. Sam had to move aside a tangle of brush to reveal the door, and when he pushed it open, the air inside was stale but cool. Margaret kept supplies here, he said, stepping inside. Canned goods, blankets, ammunition. I haven't been up here in 2 years, but most of it should still be good. Clara followed him in her eyes, adjusting to the dim interior. A narrow bed against one wall, a small table with 2 chairs, a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. How long do we stay? She asked. Long enough for me to figure out our next move. Sam set the saddlebag on the table and began unpacking. Mercer's smart. He'll have men watching the roads, the train station, probably the telegraph office too. We can't just ride into Austin and hand that ledger to somebody. Then what do? We find someone Mercer can't buy. He pulled a tin of beans from the bag and set it aside. Someone with enough power to actually do something with what your husband collected. And who would that be? Sam was quiet for a moment. Then, there's a federal marshal named James Whitmore, works out of San Antonio. He and I served together before I joined the Rangers. He's honest, maybe the only honest lawman left in this part of Texas. Can you reach him? Not from here, and not without Mercer knowing. Sam straightened up and looked at her. But I know someone who might be able to get a message through. Someone in Redstone. Clara's stomach tightened. Who? Ruth Holloway. The name hit Clara like a physical blow. Ruth. The woman who had told her about Sam in the first place. The woman who had helped her plan her escape. Ruth is the one who sent me here, Clara said slowly. She's the only person in Redstone I trust. Then we're trusting the same person. Sam's expression was grim, which means if Mercer's men are smart, they're already watching her. Clara sank into one of the chairs. Her ankle was screaming now, and the exhaustion she had been holding back was starting to creep in at the edges. So we're trapped, she said. We're careful. There's a difference. Sam pulled out the other chair and sat across from her. Ruth knows how to be discreet. She's survived in Mercer's town for 30 years without getting on his bad side. If anyone can get a message to Whitmore without being caught, it's her. And if she can't... Sam didn't answer. He didn't have to. Clara reached for the saddlebag and pulled out the ledger. She set it on the table between them, and for a moment, they both just looked at it, this ordinary-looking book that had cost one man his life and might cost them both theirs. Thomas was a good man, Clara said quietly. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't trying to be brave. He was just a clerk who noticed that the numbers didn't add up, and he couldn't let it go. Sometimes that's what being brave is, Sam said, noticing something wrong and refusing to look away. Clara looked up at him. Is that what you did with your sister? No. His voice was flat. That's what I didn't do. I noticed, and then I looked away, and she died. He paused. I won't make that mistake again. Before Clara could respond, Sam's head snapped toward the door. He held up a hand for silence, his whole body suddenly tense. Clara heard it a moment later. Hoofbeats. Distant, but getting closer. Sam was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window. He peered through a crack in the shutters, his hand already on the pistol at his hip. One rider, he said quietly, coming up the main trail. Mercer's men. Maybe. Stay here. He slipped out the door before she could argue, closing it silently behind him. Clara sat frozen at the table, her heart pounding. She could hear the hoofbeats clearly now, slowing as they approached. Then voices. Sam's low and controlled. And another voice, younger, more uncertain. She strained to hear the words, but they were too muffled. 1 minute passed, then 2. Then the door opened and Sam stepped back inside. His expression was strange, a mixture of relief and something darker that Clara couldn't identify. It's not Mercer's men, he said. Then who? Sam stepped aside and a young man followed him into the cabin. He was tall and thin, maybe 19 or 20, with sandy hair and nervous eyes that darted around the room before landing on Clara. Mrs. McAllister, he said, and his voice cracked on her name. Ruth Holloway sent me. She said you needed help. Clara recognized him then. Billy Porter. He worked at the general store in Redstone. She had bought flour from him just last week. Billy. She stood up slowly. What are you doing here? Ruth said you were in trouble. She said someone needed to warn you. Billy's hands were shaking. They came to her place this morning, Mrs. McAllister, the deputy and 2 other men. They were asking about you. Clara's blood went cold. What did she tell them? Nothing. She said she hadn't seen you since the day before yesterday. Billy swallowed hard. But they didn't believe her. They searched the whole inn, tore up her room looking for something. Did they hurt her? No, ma'am, not yet. Billy looked at Sam, then back at Clara. But the Deputy Mercer, he told her that if she was hiding anything, he'd find out. And he said... Billy trailed off. He said what? Sam's voice was sharp. He said that anyone who helped Mrs. McAllister was going to hang right alongside her. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara sat back down heavily. Ruth. Dear, kind Ruth, who had risked everything to help her escape. Now she was in danger too. I have to go back, Clara said. No. Sam's response was immediate. That's exactly what they want you to do. Ruth is in danger because of me. Ruth knew the risks. She chose to help you anyway. Sam moved to stand between Clara and the door. If you ride back into Redstone now, you'll be arrested before you get within a mile of the town line. And then Ruth's sacrifice means nothing. I can't just hide while she... You can and you will. Sam's voice was hard. Because the only way to help Ruth, the only way to help any of us, is to get that ledger to someone who can use it. Ruth knows that. That's why she sent Billy here instead of coming herself. Clara wanted to argue. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to do something, to act, to stop sitting in this cabin while people suffered for her sake. But she knew he was right. She hated that he was right. Billy, Sam said, turning to the young man. Did Ruth give you any other message? Billy nodded, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Sam. She said you'd know what to do with this. Sam unfolded the paper and read it. His face went pale. What is it? Clara asked. He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he handed her the paper without a word. Clara read it and the world tilted beneath her. It was a list of names, 6 names written in Ruth's careful handwriting, and next to each name a date, Margaret Garrett. March 3rd, 1875. Thomas McAllister, November 12th, 1878. James Dalton, June 8th, 1876. Sarah Chen, April 22nd, 1877. Michael O'Brien, September 3rd, 1877. Rebecca Stone, January 15th, 1878. 6 names, 6 deaths, all within 4 years. And at the bottom of the list, Ruth had written, "They all found something. They all died for it. You're number 7 unless you run." Clara looked up at Sam. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. 6 people, Clara said. Mercer killed 6 people. At least 6. Sam's voice was barely controlled. Those are just the ones Ruth knows about. There could be more. My husband wasn't alone. No, he wasn't. Sam took the paper back and stared at it. And neither was Margaret. Clara watched something shift in his expression. The careful control he had maintained since she arrived was cracking, and underneath it was something raw and dangerous. "Sam," she said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I spent 4 years telling myself there was nothing I could do, that the system was too corrupt, that Mercer was too powerful, that fighting back would only get more people killed." He looked at her. "I was wrong." "What changed?" "This." He held up the paper. 6 people. 6 ordinary people who noticed something wrong and refused to look away. They all died alone, thinking nobody else knew what they knew, thinking they were the only ones. He set the paper on the table next to the ledger. But they weren't alone. They were part of something bigger. A pattern that Mercer thought he could keep hidden forever. Sam's eyes were hard. He was wrong too. Clara felt something shift in her chest. For the first time since Thomas's death, the grief that had been crushing her started to transform into something else. Anger, real burning anger. "What do we do?" she asked. "We stop running." Sam straightened up. "Billy, how long can you stay away from Redstone before someone notices you're gone?" "A few hours, maybe." "I told Mr. Henderson I was delivering supplies to the Miller farm." "Good. I need you to go back to town and find Ruth. Tell her I need to know everything she knows about the other names on this list. Family members, friends, anyone who might have information. Can you do that?" Billy nodded, his nervousness giving way to determination. "Yes, sir." "And Billy?" Sam waited until the young man met his eyes. "Be careful. If anyone asks where you've been, you were at the Miller farm the whole time. You never saw me, and you never saw Mrs. McAllister. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Go." Billy slipped out the door, and a moment later, Clara heard his horse galloping away. She and Sam stood in the silence he left behind. "You're not just trying to get the ledger to the marshal anymore," Clara said. "You're building a case." "I'm building a war." Sam moved to the window and watched Billy disappear over the ridge. "Mercer thinks he's untouchable because he's picked off his enemies one by one. But if we can connect all those deaths, show that they're part of a pattern, then it's not just my word against his." "Exactly." Clara picked up the ledger and held it against her chest. Thomas's handwriting, Thomas's evidence, Thomas's death finally meaning something. "He would have wanted this," she said quietly. "Thomas. He would have wanted us to finish what he started." Sam turned from the window. "Then let's finish it." The sun was high overhead when they heard the second set of hoofbeats. This time there was no warning, no time to prepare. Sam barely had time to shove Clara toward the back of the cabin before the door burst open and a man stepped through with a gun already drawn. Deputy Elijah Mercer. Clara recognized him immediately. He was younger than she expected, no more than 30, with his father's dark eyes and a jawline that would have been handsome if his expression weren't so cold. "Samuel Garrett," he said, pointing the gun at Sam's chest. "I had a feeling you might be involved in this." Sam's hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't draw. "Deputy, long way from Redstone. Not so far when you know where to look." Elijah's eyes flicked to Clara. "Mrs. McAllister, my father's been worried about you." "I'm sure he has." "He wants to talk to you. Clear up some misunderstandings about your husband's death." "There's nothing to clear up. Your father murdered my husband." Elijah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation." "I have proof." "You have a dead man's notebook and a lot of grief." Elijah took a step closer. "My father is a respected judge, a pillar of this community, and you're a widow who's clearly suffering from the strain of loss." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Clara stepped forward, ignoring Sam's warning hand. "Is that how you sleep at night, by pretending you don't know what your father really is?" "Clara," Sam started. "No." She shook off his hand. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid." She faced Elijah directly. "Your father killed 6 people that I know of. Probably more. He stole their land, destroyed their families, and covered it all up with bribes and threats. And you—" She jabbed a finger at his chest. "You help him do it." Elijah's gun wavered, just slightly, just for a moment. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out Ruth's list. Margaret Garrett, Thomas McAllister, James Dalton, Sarah Chen, Michael O'Brien, Rebecca Stone. "Those are the names I know. How many more are there, Deputy? How many more people has your father killed while you looked the other way?" Elijah's face went pale. He stared at the list in Clara's hand, and for just a moment the cold mask slipped. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? The point is, I have it, and I have the ledger, and I have witnesses who are willing to testify about what your father has done." Clara stepped closer. "This is over, Elijah. You can either help us end it, or you can go down with him. Your choice." The cabin was silent. Sam stood ready, his hand still near his gun, watching Elijah's every move. And Elijah looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump. "My mother," he said quietly. Clara blinked. "What?" "My mother died when I was 12. Fever, they said." Elijah's voice was barely above a whisper. "She had been fighting with my father for weeks before that, threatening to leave him, threatening to tell people things she knew." The words hung in the air. "And then she got sick," Elijah continued. "So suddenly, so conveniently." He looked at Clara, and there were tears in his eyes. "I've spent 18 years trying not to ask the obvious question. 18 years telling myself that my father couldn't possibly—" He trailed off. "But you know," Clara said softly. "Don't you? You've always known." Elijah lowered his gun. "I can't help you," he said. "If I turn against him, he'll destroy me. He'll destroy everything." "He's going to destroy you anyway," Sam said, speaking for the first time. "Men like your father don't share power, Deputy. They use people until those people aren't useful anymore. And then they get rid of them. You don't know that. I know that my sister trusted your father. She thought he was a friend, a protector." Sam's voice was hard. 3 months later she was dead, and her land belonged to Morrison Mining. Elijah flinched. "Margaret Garrett," he said. "I remember her. She was kind to me when I was younger. She was kind to everyone. It didn't save her. Elijah stood there, gun hanging at his side, looking like a man whose entire world was crumbling around him. "I can't," he said finally. "I'm sorry. I can't." He turned toward the door. "Elijah," Clara said. He stopped. "If you walk out that door and tell your father where we are, more people will die. You know that." She paused. "But if you walk out that door and don't tell him, if you give us time." "Time for what?" "Time to bring him down. Time to end this. Time for you to decide what kind of man you want to be." Elijah stood with his back to them, his shoulders rigid. 3 days, he said finally. "I'll tell him I searched the area and found nothing. That will buy you 3 days." He turned his head slightly. "After that, I can't protect you." "We don't need your protection," Sam said. "We need you to stay out of our way." "I can do that." Elijah opened the door. "But Mrs. McAllister, yes. If you're wrong about this, if that ledger doesn't prove what you say, it proves my father will find you. And what he does to you will make your husband's death look merciful." He walked out without another word. Clara and Sam stood in the silence he left behind, listening to his horse's hoofbeats fade into the distance. "Do you trust him?" Clara asked. "No," Sam said. "But I don't think he's lying either. He's scared. And scared men are predictable." "What do we do now?" Sam picked up the ledger from the table and looked at it for a long moment. "Now we have 3 days to do what I thought would take weeks." He looked at Clara. "We build our case. We contact Marshal Whitmore, and we pray that Ruth can get us the information we need before Mercer figures out what we're doing." Clara nodded slowly. 3 days. 72 hours to bring down the most powerful man in Texas. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had that morning. "Sam," she said. "Yeah. Thank you for not sending me away." He looked at her, and for just a moment, something softer flickered behind his eyes. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We haven't won anything." "I know. But you could have stayed out of this. You could have kept your head down and let me handle it alone." She paused. "You didn't." Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Margaret used to tell me that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph was for good men to do nothing. I spent 4 years doing nothing." He met her eyes. "I'm done with that." Clara felt something shift in her chest, something that had been frozen for 8 months, starting to thaw. "So am I," she said. Outside, the Texas sun beat down on the dry earth, and somewhere in the distance, a storm was building. They had 3 days. It would have to be enough. Billy returned before nightfall, with more than Ruth's message. He brought Ruth herself. Clara heard the horse's first 2 sets of hoofbeats instead of 1, and her hand went immediately to the pistol Sam had given her that morning. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she had learned in the past 3 days that desperation was an excellent teacher. Sam was already at the window, his own gun drawn. But when the riders came into view, he lowered his weapon and let out a breath that might have been relief. "It's them," he said. "Ruth and the boy." Clara was at the door before he finished speaking. Ruth Holloway dismounted with the stiff movements of a woman who hadn't been on a horse in 20 years and wasn't pleased about breaking that streak. She was 62 years old, silver-haired, and had a face that had seen enough trouble to recognize it coming from a mile away. "Don't look at me like that," Ruth said before Clara could speak. "I know it was stupid to come, but some things can't be said in a letter, and Billy's a sweet boy. But he'd forget half of what I needed to tell you before he got back up this ridge. Ruth, if they followed you, they didn't follow me. I've been sneaking around that town since before Howard Mercer owned his first pair of boots. I know how to disappear when I need to." Ruth climbed the steps to the cabin and looked Clara up and down. "You look terrible." "I've been running for my life." "That'll do it." Ruth turned to Sam. "Samuel Garrett, you look just like your sister." Something flickered across Sam's face. You knew Margaret. I knew everyone worth knowing in this county for the last 40 years. Margaret was one of the good ones. Ruth's expression softened. I was sorry when she died. Sorrier when I figured out why. Sam stepped aside to let her enter. What do you know about why? More than I should, less than I'd like. Ruth settled into one of the chairs with a groan. Billy, get the saddlebags. There's something in there these two need to see. Billy hurried to comply, and a moment later, he set a pair of worn leather bags on the table. Ruth opened one and pulled out a stack of papers, letters, and what looked like a small leather journal. I've been collecting these for years, Ruth said. Didn't know what I was collecting at first. Just bits and pieces. Stories that didn't quite add up. Deaths that happened too conveniently. Land that changed hands too fast. She spread the papers across the table. After your husband died, Clara, I started putting it together. And when I found out what he'd been investigating, Ruth shook her head. That man was braver than he knew, and smarter than Mercer gave him credit for. Clara reached for the papers with trembling hands. Letters, receipts, a map with sections marked in red ink. What is all this proof? Ruth's voice was grim. Not enough on its own, but combined with what Thomas collected. She looked at Sam. Combined with what Margaret wrote in her journal before she died. Sam went very still. Margaret's journal. Ruth reached into the bag again and pulled out a small book bound in faded blue cloth. She held it out to Sam. She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe until someone came along who could use it. Ruth's eyes were wet. I've been waiting 4 years for that someone, Samuel. I think you're him. Sam took the journal like it was made of glass. His hands were shaking. She never told me she was keeping a record, he said quietly. She didn't want to worry you. You were off ranging doing important work. She thought she could handle Mercer on her own. Ruth paused. She was wrong about that. But she wasn't wrong about the evidence she found. Sam opened the journal. Clara watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his jaw clench tighter with every page. She knew, he said finally. She knew everything. The land fraud, the bribes, the murders. He looked up at Ruth. She knew about Mercer's wife. Clara's head snapped toward him. What about Mercer's wife? Elijah mentioned his mother died of fever when he was 12, Sam said. Margaret wrote about it here. She talked to the doctor who attended Mrs. Mercer in her final days. He told Margaret the symptoms didn't match any fever he'd ever seen. He thought... Sam stopped. He thought she was poisoned, Ruth finished. Dr. Cole. He's still alive, by the way. Lives about 3 miles outside of town now. Retired. Too scared to talk to anyone about what he knows. Clara felt her stomach turn. Mercer killed his own wife. She was going to leave him, going to take Elijah and go back to her family in Boston, going to tell people about the things she'd seen. Ruth's voice was flat. Howard Mercer doesn't let people leave. He doesn't let people talk. He makes them disappear, and then he makes everyone too afraid to ask questions. Sam closed the journal. His face was carved from stone. Where does Dr. Cole live? Sam, he's terrified. He won't... Where does he live, Ruth? Ruth gave him directions. Sam was moving toward the door before she finished. I'm going with you, Clara said. No, if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong, I'm not staying here waiting to find out what happened. Clara grabbed the pistol and shoved it into her belt. We do this together, Sam. That's how it works now. Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Ruth, stay here with Billy. If we're not back by morning, I know what to do. Ruth's face was grim. I've been preparing for this for years. There's a copy of everything in that bag hidden somewhere. Mercer will never find it. If you two don't come back, I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just come back." They rode hard toward Dr. Cole's place, pushing the horses until their flanks were slick with sweat. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. "Sam," she said as they rode, "what Margaret wrote about Mercer's wife, do you think Elijah knows?" "I think Elijah suspects. That's why he let us go yesterday. He's been carrying that weight his whole life, and he's tired of pretending." "Can we trust him?" "No." Sam's voice was hard. "But we can use him. There's a difference." They reached Dr. Cole's place just as the last light faded from the sky. It was a small house, set back from the road with no lights in the windows. Sam dismounted and approached the door cautiously. Clara followed her hand on the pistol. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again harder. "Dr. Cole, my name is Samuel Garrett. I need to talk to you about Margaret Garrett, about what you told her before she died." Silence. Then slowly the door opened a crack. An old man peered out. He was thin, stooped, with watery blue eyes that held the particular fear of someone who had spent years waiting for the past to catch up with him. "I don't know anyone named Margaret Garrett," he said. "Yes, you do." Sam's voice was steady but firm. "You treated her the week before she died. You told her about Elizabeth Mercer's death, about what you really thought happened." Dr. Cole's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Doctor, my sister is dead because of what she knew. This woman's husband is dead because of what he knew. We have evidence that could bring down Howard Mercer, but we need your testimony to make it stick." "I can't." "You can." Clara stepped forward. "You've been hiding for years, living in fear, waiting for Mercer to decide you know too much. But that's not living, Dr. Cole. That's just dying slowly." The old man's hands were shaking. "If I talk, he'll kill me. If you don't talk, he'll keep killing," Sam said. "He'll keep taking land, keep destroying families, keep burying anyone who gets in his way. Is that the legacy you want to leave?" Silence. Dr. Cole stared at them for a long moment. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his bones, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "Quickly, before someone sees you." The story came out slowly, haltingly, like water dripping from a cracked pipe. Dr. Cole had been the town physician for 30 years. He had delivered babies, set broken bones, closed the eyes of the dying. He had seen everything a frontier doctor could see, but nothing had prepared him for Elizabeth Mercer. "She came to me 3 months before she died," he said. "Said she was feeling unwell. Headaches, nausea, weakness in her limbs. I examined her, couldn't find anything wrong. Told her to rest, drink plenty of water, come back if it got worse." "And did it get worse?" Clara asked. "It got much worse." Dr. Cole's voice was barely above a whisper. "Over the next few weeks, she started losing weight, losing hair. Her skin took on a yellowish tint. I'd never seen anything like it." "Poison," Sam said flatly. "I didn't know that then. I thought it might be some kind of wasting disease, something I'd never encountered." Dr. Cole rubbed his face. "She died in terrible pain. Convulsions, vomiting. At the end, she was barely conscious, but she kept saying the same thing over and over." "What was she saying?" "He knows. He knows I was going to leave." Dr. Cole looked at them with haunted eyes. "I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But later, after I started reading about different types of poisoning, after I started putting the pieces together." "What kind of poison?" Clara asked. "Arsenic. The symptoms fit perfectly. The gradual onset, the hair loss, the skin discoloration, the convulsions at the end." Dr. Cole shook his head. "Someone had been putting arsenic in her food for weeks. Small doses at first, then larger ones. A slow, deliberate murder." Sam's hands were clenched into fists. "And you never told anyone?" "I told Margaret Garrett." Dr. Cole's voice broke. "That was my mistake. I thought if someone else knew, someone could do something. But then Margaret died. And I knew that if I said anything, I'd be next. So you ran. I moved out here, kept my head down, stopped practicing medicine. Dr. Cole laughed bitterly. I've spent the last 4 years waiting for Howard Mercer to decide I was a loose end that needed tying. Clara and Sam exchanged a look. Dr. Cole, Clara said carefully, would you be willing to put this in writing? Sign a statement about what you observed, what you believe happened to Elizabeth Mercer? If I do that, I'm signing my own death warrant. If you don't do that, more people will die. Sam leaned forward. My sister, this woman's husband, 6 other people at least. And that's just what we know about. How many more, Dr. Cole? How many more has he killed while you stayed silent? The old man's face crumpled. I was afraid. I know. We're all afraid. Sam's voice softened slightly. But fear doesn't excuse everything. Sometimes you have to do the right thing, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Dr. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a pen and a sheet of paper and sat back down. Tell me what to write, he said. They left Dr. Cole's house an hour later with a signed statement in Clara's saddlebag. It wasn't enough on its own. But combined with Thomas's ledger, with Margaret's journal, with Ruth's collection of evidence, it was starting to look like something. We need to get this to Marshal Whitmore, Sam said as they rode. Tonight if possible. How, you said Mercer's men are watching the roads? There's a telegraph office in Millbrook, 20 miles east. Mercer doesn't have influence there. Sam pushed his horse faster. If we ride through the night, we can send a message to Whitmore at first light. And if Mercer finds out, then we'd better hope Whitmore moves fast. They rode east, pushing their horses hard, stopping only to let the animals rest and drink. The night was hot and close, the air thick with the smell of dust and dry grass, and Clara found herself thinking about Thomas. He had ridden roads like this, alone in the dark carrying evidence that could get him killed. He had known the risks. He had done it anyway. She understood that now. She understood the particular courage it took to keep going when everything inside you screamed to stop. Sam, she said during one of their rest stops, what happens after we send the message? We wait. Whitmore will need time to mobilize. He'll have to convince his superiors, gather men, make a plan. How much time? Days, maybe a week. We don't have a week. Elijah gave us 3 days and one of those is almost gone. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then we'll have to buy more time. How? I don't know yet. He looked at her in the darkness. But we've come this far. We're not going to fail now. They reached Millbrook just as the sun was coming up. The telegraph office was a small building on the main street, not yet open for business. Sam pounded on the door until a bleary-eyed clerk appeared. We're closed, the clerk said. Sam pulled out a handful of coins. We need to send a message, now. It's urgent. The clerk looked at the money, then at Sam's face. Whatever he saw there convinced him not to argue. Fine, come in. Sam dictated the message while Clara watched the street outside. Every passing rider made her heart jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. To Federal Marshal James Whitmore, San Antonio, Sam said. Evidence secured regarding Judge Howard Mercer Redstone. Multiple murders, land fraud, corruption of officials. Witnesses willing to testify. Request immediate assistance. Lives at stake. Samuel Garrett. The clerk tapped out the message on the telegraph key. The sound was loud in the quiet morning air. Sent, he said. Response could take hours, maybe longer. We'll wait. They found a spot across the street where they could watch the telegraph office and waited. The morning grew hotter. People began moving through the streets, going about their business, unaware of the 2 strangers watching from the shadows. An hour passed, then 2. Clara was starting to lose hope when the clerk came running out of the office waving a piece of paper. Message for you, he said breathlessly. From San Antonio. Sam snatched the paper and read it aloud. Evidence received. Mobilizing team. Estimate arrival. Redstone 3 days. Hold position if safe. If unsafe, proceed to San Antonio immediately. Whitmore. 3 days. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. 3 days and help would arrive. 3 days and all of this would finally be over. We need to get back, Sam said. Tell Ruth. Make a plan. They were mounting their horses when Clara saw him. Deputy Elijah Mercer standing at the end of the street watching them. Sam. Her voice was tight. Sam followed her gaze. His hand moved toward his gun, but Elijah didn't draw his weapon. He didn't call for backup. He just stood there watching, his face unreadable. Then slowly he tipped his hat to them and turned away. What was that? Clara breathed. I don't know. Sam's voice was wary. But we're not sticking around to find out. Let's go. They rode hard back toward the cabin, pushing their exhausted horses to the limit. Clara's mind was racing. Elijah had seen them. He knew where they had been, what they had done. Would he tell his father? Would the 3 days Whitmore needed be cut short? They were 2 miles from the cabin when they saw the smoke. Clara's heart stopped. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Sam spurred his horse forward, and Clara followed, her stomach churning with dread. The cabin was burning. Flames poured from the windows, from the door, from the roof. The heat was intense, pushing them back as they approached. Ruth! Clara screamed. Billy! No answer. Sam jumped from his horse and ran toward the burning building. Clara tried to follow, but the heat was too intense. She couldn't get close. Sam, stop! You can't! He ignored her. He was almost to the door when a figure emerged from the trees behind them. Ruth. Alive, covered in soot and ash, but alive. Don't! She shouted. Don't go in there! Sam stopped, turned. Ruth, where's Billy? Here. Billy stepped out of the trees behind Ruth, coughing. We got out. We got out just in time. Clara ran to Ruth and grabbed her shoulders. What happened? Mercer's men, Ruth said. 3 of them. Came about an hour after you left. We barely made it out the back before they set the fire. The evidence. Safe. Ruth held up a saddlebag. I grabbed everything before we ran. Margaret's journal, the letters, all of it. Clara felt weak with relief. Thank God. Don't thank God yet. Ruth's face was grim. They weren't just trying to destroy the evidence, Clara. They were sending a message. What do you mean? Ruth reached into the bag and pulled out a piece of paper. She handed it to Clara. It was a note written in a careful, elegant hand. Mrs. McAllister, I know what you have, and I know what you've done. You have until sundown tomorrow to return my property and turn yourself in. If you do not, I will burn everything you love to the ground, starting with the people who helped you. Do not test my patience. Howard Mercer. Clara read the note twice. Her hands were shaking, but not with fear, with anger. He thinks he can threaten me, she said quietly. He thinks I'll just give up. Clara? Sam started. No. She looked at him, and there was something fierce and unbreakable in her eyes. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting this man control my life. She crumpled the note and threw it into the fire. We have 3 days until Whitmore arrives, she said. 3 days to keep the evidence safe, keep ourselves alive, and make sure Howard Mercer doesn't hurt anyone else. How? Ruth asked. Clara looked at Sam. Sam looked back at her. We go on the offensive, Sam said slowly. We stop reacting to what Mercer does and start making him react to us. And how exactly do we do that? Clara felt a cold smile spread across her face. We let him think he's winning, she said. We let him think we're scared and desperate and ready to break. And then when he least expects it, we show him exactly what happens when you underestimate a widow with nothing left to lose. Ruth stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound that was half admiration and half disbelief. "Margaret would have liked you," she said. "I'll take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. Ruth looked at the burning cabin, then back at Clara. "All right, Mrs. McAllister, what's the plan?" Clara turned to face the fire. Behind her, she could feel Sam's presence, steady and solid. Beside her, Ruth and Billy waited. 4 people against the most powerful man in Texas. The odds were terrible. But for the first time since Thomas died, Clara McAllister felt something that had been missing for 8 long months. Hope. "The plan," she said, "is to make Howard Mercer wish he had never heard my name." The plan was simple. Dangerous, but simple. Clara would walk into Redstone alone. "Absolutely not," Sam said the moment she explained it. "It's the only way." Clara's voice was calm. Too calm. "Mercer wants me. He wants the ledger. If I show up in town alone looking beaten and scared, he'll think he's won. And then what? He arrests you, kills you." "He won't kill me, not right away. He needs to know where the evidence is first. He needs to know who else has seen it." Clara looked at Sam steadily. "That conversation will take time. Time for you to get into position. Time for Ruth to spread the word about what Mercer really is. Spread the word to who the whole town is in his pocket. Not everyone." Ruth spoke up from where she sat on a fallen log still covered in ash from the cabin fire. "There are people in Redstone who've been waiting years for someone to stand up to Howard Mercer. They're scared, but they're not blind. If they knew there was evidence, real evidence, some of them might find their courage." Sam shook his head. "It's too risky. If anything goes wrong, then I die." Clara's voice didn't waver. "But if we do nothing, if we just hide and wait for Whitmore, Mercer will find us eventually. He'll destroy the evidence and kill everyone who knows about it. At least this way we control the timing. You're asking me to let you walk into a trap. I'm asking you to trust me." Clara stepped closer to him. "You said your sister was brave. You said she noticed something wrong and refused to look away. Well, I'm looking, Sam. I've been looking since the night I found Thomas's ledger, and I'm not going to look away now. Not when we're this close." Sam's jaw was tight. His hands were clenched at his sides. "If he hurts you, then you make sure it wasn't for nothing." They stared at each other for a long moment. Something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "Fine," Sam said finally. "But we do it my way. I'm not letting you walk in there without backup. I wouldn't have it any other way." They spent the next hour working out the details. Ruth would enter town first through the back roads and start quietly spreading word about Mercer's crimes to the people she trusted. Billy would position himself near the telegraph office, ready to send an emergency message to Whitmore if things went wrong. And Sam would follow Clara into town, staying hidden, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. "One more thing," Ruth said as they prepared to leave. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small Derringer pistol. "It's not much, but it's easy to hide. If things go bad—" Clara took the gun and slipped it into her boot. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just don't die." Ruth's eyes were wet. "I've lost too many good people to that man. I don't want to lose you too." Clara hugged her, a quick, fierce embrace that said everything words couldn't. Then she mounted her horse and rode toward Redstone. The town looked different in daylight than it had the night she fled. Smaller somehow, meaner. The buildings seemed to lean toward each other like conspirators sharing secrets, and the people on the streets moved with the careful, hurried steps of those who knew they were being watched. Clara rode straight down the main street, making no effort to hide. She wanted to be seen. She wanted Mercer to know she was coming. She didn't have to wait long. Deputy Elijah Mercer stepped out of the sheriff's office before she reached the end of the street. His hand rested on his gun, but he didn't draw it. "Mrs. McAllister," he said, "my father's been expecting you." "I'm sure he has." "You're alone, as you can see." Elijah studied her face, looking for the lie. Clara kept her expression neutral, her breathing steady. "Follow me," he said finally. He led her to the courthouse, a large stone building at the center of town. Judge Howard Mercer's domain. His throne. Clara had never been inside before, but she had imagined it many times since Thomas's death. The place where justice was supposed to live. The place where it had been murdered instead. Elijah opened the door to a large office on the second floor and stepped aside. "Father," he said, "she's here." Howard Mercer sat behind an enormous wooden desk, his hands folded in front of him like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. He was older than Clara had expected, 60 at least, with white hair and a face that might have been handsome once before cruelty carved its lines into something cold. "Mrs. McAllister." His voice was smooth, cultured, almost pleasant. "Please sit down." Clara remained standing. "I'd rather not." "As you wish." Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I must admit I'm surprised you came. Most people in your position would have kept running." "Running doesn't solve anything. You taught me that." "Did I?" "You killed my husband for what he knew. You burned down my home. You threatened everyone I care about." Clara kept her voice steady. "Running would only delay the inevitable. I decided I'd rather face it head on." Mercer's smile widened. "I do appreciate directness. So let me be direct with you, Mrs. McAllister. You have something that belongs to me. A ledger, I believe. Some papers. Perhaps a journal or two. And if I do, then you'll give them to me, along with the names of everyone who has seen them." Mercer leaned back in his chair. "In exchange, I'll allow you to leave Redstone alive. You can go anywhere you like, California perhaps. Somewhere far away, where you can start over. And the people who helped me, they'll be dealt with appropriately. Meaning killed. Meaning they'll face the consequences of their actions." Mercer's voice hardened slightly. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Mrs. McAllister. You came here alone, unarmed, with nothing but your righteous anger to protect you. That's admirable in a way, but it's also foolish." Clara felt the weight of the derringer in her boot. Not unarmed, not entirely. "I didn't come here to negotiate," she said. "I came here to tell you something." "Oh, and what's that?" "It's over." Clara stepped closer to the desk. "Your crimes, your murders, your corruption, all of it. Federal Marshal James Whitmore is on his way from San Antonio with a team of deputies. He has copies of every piece of evidence Thomas collected. He has signed testimony from Dr. Cole about how you murdered your own wife. He has everything he needs to destroy you." Something flickered in Mercer's eyes. Just for a moment. Then the smooth mask was back. "That's a fascinating story, Mrs. McAllister. Unfortunately, it's also a lie. If you had truly sent evidence to a federal marshal, you wouldn't be standing in my office right now. You'd be hiding somewhere waiting for the cavalry to arrive. Maybe I got tired of hiding. Or maybe you're bluffing." Mercer stood slowly, his hands flat on the desk. "You're desperate, Mrs. McAllister. You've been running for days, watching everything you care about burn. You came here hoping to stall for time, hoping that if you just kept talking long enough, something would save you." He walked around the desk toward her. Clara held her ground. "Nothing is going to save you," he said softly. "No marshal, no evidence, no clever plan. You're going to tell me where the ledger is, and then you're going to disappear. Just like your husband, just like Margaret Garrett, just like everyone else who thought they could stand against me." Clara's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Thomas wasn't afraid of you," she said. "Even at the end, even when he knew what was coming, he wasn't afraid. Is that supposed to inspire me? It's supposed to tell you something about the kind of man he was, the kind of man you killed." Clara's voice dropped. "He knew the risks. He took them anyway, because some things are more important than survival." "How noble!" Mercer's voice dripped with contempt. "And how utterly pointless. Your husband died accomplishing nothing. His evidence is scattered, his allies are broken, and his widow is about to join him in whatever afterlife awaits fools and dreamers. You're wrong. Am I? Thomas accomplished something you'll never understand. Clara felt something shift inside her, the fear burning away, replaced by something harder. He proved that one ordinary man could uncover the truth about a monster like you. That no amount of money or power or violence could hide what you really are. She stepped even closer, close enough to see the first flicker of uncertainty in Mercer's eyes. And now, everyone's going to know it. The whole territory. The whole country. They're going to know that Judge Howard Mercer is a murderer, a thief and a coward who poisoned his own wife because she threatened to leave him. Mercer's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. His grip was brutal, crushing. "Where is the ledger?" he hissed. "Somewhere you'll never find it." "I will find it. I'll tear this county apart if I have to." The door burst open. Sam stood in the doorway, his gun drawn, his face cold as death. "Let her go." Mercer's eyes widened. "Garrett, I should have known." "I said let her go. Now." Mercer released Clara's arm, but didn't step back. "You're making a mistake, both of you." "The only mistake I made was waiting 4 years to do this." Sam moved into the room, his gun never wavering. "Get away from her." Clara backed toward Sam, her arm throbbing where Mercer had grabbed it. "You think you can just walk out of here?" Mercer laughed. "This is my town, my courthouse, my law." "Your law ended the day you killed my sister." Something shifted in Mercer's expression. "Margaret Garrett was a troublemaker. She should have accepted my offer and sold her land peacefully. She should have shot you the first time you threatened her." "Perhaps." Mercer's voice was cold. "But she didn't. And neither will you, Mr. Garrett. Because if you kill me, you'll never make it out of this building alive. My men are everywhere." "Your men are currently occupied." Sam's smile was grim. "Seems someone's been spreading rumors about their employer. About murders and stolen land and poisoned wives. Funny how quick people turn when they realize they've been working for a monster." For the first time, real fear flickered across Mercer's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sam cocked his head. "Listen." Clara heard it then. Voices outside, raised angry voices, the sound of a crowd gathering. "Ruth's been busy," Sam said. "Turns out there are a lot of people in Redstone who've lost family to your schemes. A lot of people who've been waiting for someone to tell them they weren't crazy, that their loved ones didn't just die of fever or fall into mine shafts or disappear in the night." "A mob." Mercer's voice was tight. "You've raised a mob against me. I've told the truth. What people do with it is up to them." Mercer's hand moved toward his desk drawer. Sam's gun shifted. "Don't," Sam said quietly. "I've been waiting 4 years for an excuse to kill you. Don't give me one." Mercer's hand stopped. "Father." Everyone turned. Elijah stood in the doorway, his face pale, his gun holstered. "Elijah," Mercer said. "Arrest these people." Elijah didn't move. "Elijah, I gave you an order." "I heard you." Elijah's voice was strange, hollow. "I've been hearing your orders my whole life, following them, telling myself that you knew best, that everything you did was for the family, for our future. It was. It is. Everything I've done has been for you. You killed my mother." The words fell like stones into still water. "Elijah." "Don't." Elijah's voice cracked. "Don't lie to me anymore. I've spent 18 years pretending I didn't see it. Didn't know, it didn't understand why she got sick so suddenly, so conveniently right when she was planning to leave you." He stepped into the room, his hand finally moving to his gun. "I read Margaret Garrett's journal. I read what Dr. Cole told her about Mother's symptoms. I read everything." Tears were streaming down his face now. "You poisoned her. Your own wife. The mother of your only child. You poisoned her, And then you held her hand while she died, and you told me it was God's will." Mercer's face had gone white. "Elijah, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Elijah drew his gun and pointed it at his father. "I understand that I've spent my whole life serving a murderer, that I've helped you destroy families, steal land, cover up crimes, that I'm as guilty as you are." "Son, don't call me that." Elijah's hand was shaking, but the gun stayed level. "You don't get to call me that anymore." Clara watched the scene unfold with her heart in her throat. Father and son facing each other across a lifetime of lies. "What are you going to do?" Mercer's voice was barely a whisper. "Shoot me, in front of witnesses." "No." Elijah lowered his gun slowly. "I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to tell the truth." He turned to Sam and Clara. "Marshal Whitmore is coming from San Antonio. When he gets here, I'll testify to everything I know. Every crime, every cover-up, every body buried where no one would find it." He looked back at his father. "It's over. All of it." Mercer lunged for his desk drawer. Sam fired. The bullet caught Mercer in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed into the wall and slid down, clutching the wound, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You'll hang for this," he gasped. "All of you. I'll see you all hang." "No." Clara walked toward him slowly, looking down at the man who had destroyed so much. "You won't." She reached into his desk drawer and pulled out the pistol he had been reaching for. She ejected the bullets and let them scatter across the floor. "It's over, Judge Mercer. Your power, your money, your threats, none of it matters anymore. The truth is out, and the truth is something you can't kill." Outside, the crowd had grown louder. Clara could hear individual voices now shouting names, demanding justice, years of fear and grief transforming into something else, something like hope. Sam moved to the window and looked out. "Half the town's out there," he said, "and more coming." "What do we do with him?" Elijah asked, looking at his father with something between hatred and pity. "We hold him until Whitmore arrives." Sam turned from the window. "He gets a real trial, a fair one, the kind he never gave anyone else." Clara looked at Mercer bleeding on the floor of his own office, stripped of everything that had made him powerful. "Thomas would have wanted that," she said quietly. "Justice, not revenge." Mercer laughed a wet, bitter sound. "You think this is justice? A mob outside my door? My own son turned against me. This is chaos." "This is consequences," Clara said. "Something you've been avoiding for too long." She turned away from him and walked toward Sam. "It's not finished yet," she said. "Whitmore won't be here for 2 more days. A lot can happen in 2 days." "I know." Sam reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and steady. "But we've got something we didn't have before." "What's that?" "Each other." He looked at her with something soft behind his eyes. "Whatever happens next, we face it together. Deal." Clara felt the tears she had been holding back finally start to fall. "Deal," she whispered. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Inside, Howard Mercer bled on the floor of his empire, watching everything he had built crumble around him. And Clara McAllister, the widow who had refused to stay quiet, stood in the ruins and felt something she had forgotten was possible. Victory. The 2 days that followed were the longest of Clara's life. They held Mercer in his own jail cell, guarded by Sam and a rotating group of townspeople, who had finally found the courage to stand against the man who had terrorized them for decades. Ruth organized them with the efficiency of a general assigning shifts, managing food and water, keeping watch for any of Mercer's remaining loyalists who might try something desperate. Clara spent most of that time at the sheriff's office going through the evidence one more time, making sure everything was in order for when Whitmore arrived. Thomas's ledger, Margaret's journal, Dr. Cole's signed statement, Ruth's collection of letters and documents, the testimony Elijah had agreed to give, It was enough. She knew it was enough, but she couldn't stop checking. "You need to sleep," Sam said on the second night, finding her hunched over the desk with papers spread around her like fallen leaves. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face." Clara rubbed her temples. "Not Mercer's. Thomas's. The way he looked the morning he left for work that last day. He knew something was wrong. He knew they were getting close. And he went anyway." Sam pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "That's who he was. I should have stopped him. I should have made him see. You couldn't have stopped him any more than you could stop a river from flowing downhill." Sam's voice was gentle. "Some people are built to fight, Clara, to push back against what's wrong no matter the cost. Your husband was one of those people. So was my sister. So are you. Maybe." He looked at her steadily. "So are you." Clara shook her head. "I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn. In my experience, those are the same thing." She almost smiled. Almost. "Sam, what happens after Whitmore takes Mercer away? After the trial, after everything?" "I don't know. I don't either." Clara looked down at her hands, rough now, calloused from the past few days of riding and fighting and surviving. "I've spent so long focused on this one thing. Getting justice for Thomas. Making Mercer pay. I don't know who I am without that." "You're Clara McAllister." Sam reached out and covered her hands with his. "You're the woman who walked 4 miles in the dark with a twisted ankle. Who faced down a murderer in his own office. Who turned a whole town against the man everyone was afraid of." "I had help. Everyone has help. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." Sam squeezed her hands gently. "You asked me once why I decided to help you. I told you it was because of Margaret, because of the ledger, because I was tired of looking away." "I remember. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth." He paused, and Clara saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. "The whole truth is that I saw something in you that first night, something I recognized, something I thought I'd lost a long time ago." "What was that?" "The belief that things can get better, that fighting matters, that one person can make a difference." Sam's voice was rough. "I'd given up on all of that after Margaret died. I'd convinced myself that the world was too broken to fix, that the best I could do was stay out of its way and survive. And now I'm not so sure." He met her eyes. "You showed me something, Clara. You showed me that giving up isn't the same as being realistic. It's just another kind of cowardice." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Sam, I'm not done." He took a breath. "When this is over, when Mercer is gone and the town is safe, I'd like—" He trailed off, struggling with words that didn't come easily to a man who had spent 4 years speaking to no one but himself. Clara waited. "I'd like you to stay," he said finally. "At the ranch, with me. Not because of any arrangement or agreement. Just because I want you there. Because I can't imagine going back to the way things were before you showed up on my porch." Clara's heart was pounding. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to give me a chance to deserve you." Sam's voice cracked slightly. "I know I'm not much. I know you've been through hell, and you probably want to run as far from Texas as you can get. But if you'd consider staying, if you'd consider letting me try to be the kind of man worth staying for." Clara leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't a long kiss. It wasn't passionate or dramatic or anything like the novels she had read as a girl. It was soft and warm, and tasted like tears, and when she pulled back, Sam was looking at her with an expression of stunned wonder. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "That's a stop talking and let me answer," Clara said, and there was a real smile on her face now, the first one in longer than she could remember. "Yes, Sam, I'll stay. I'll give you that chance. I'll give us both that chance." Sam pulled her into his arms and held her close, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The words had done their work. What remained was simpler and more powerful than language. Two broken people holding on to each other in the darkness, finally believing that dawn might actually come. Marshal James Whitmore arrived the next morning with 6 deputies and a warrant for Howard Mercer's arrest. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He dismounted in front of the sheriff's office and looked around at the crowd that had gathered at the armed townspeople standing guard at the burned remnants of the cabin on the ridge visible in the distance. "Sam Garrett," he said, extending his hand. "Been a long time." "Too long." Sam shook his hand. "Thanks for coming." "Thank me after you show me what you've got." Whitmore's gaze moved to Clara. "And you must be Mrs. McAllister. Your husband's ledger is quite something." "You've seen it." Ruth Holloway sent copies ahead. Smart woman. Whitmore's expression was grim. "If half of what's in there is true, Judge Mercer is going to hang." "It's all true," Clara said. "Every word." "Then let's get to work." The next several hours were a blur of official business. Whitmore took statements from Clara, from Sam, from Ruth, from Dr. Cole, from Elijah, from a dozen townspeople who had finally found the courage to speak about what they had witnessed over the years. The evidence was overwhelming. Land fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, and murder, at least 8 counts that could be proven, possibly more that would emerge as the investigation continued. Mercer himself said nothing. He sat in his cell with his wounded shoulder bandaged, and his face blank, refusing to speak to anyone, not even his own son. "He's done," Whitmore said after reviewing everything. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of corruption I've ever seen. Your husband was thorough, Mrs. McAllister, meticulous. He built a case that even the best lawyers in the country won't be able to tear apart." "He was a clerk," Clara said softly. "He noticed things. He wrote them down. That's all." "That's everything." Whitmore looked at her with something like respect. "Most people see something wrong and look the other way. Your husband looked closer. That takes a particular kind of courage." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "What happens now?" Sam asked. "We transport Mercer to San Antonio for trial. Federal jurisdiction, federal court, federal judge, someone who hasn't been bought and paid for." Whitmore paused. "It'll take months to sort through everything, maybe longer. But the outcome isn't in doubt. He'll hang." "And Elijah?" "That's more complicated." Whitmore rubbed his jaw. "He's complicit in a lot of what his father did, but he's also the key witness. His testimony is what ties everything together. I've spoken to the prosecutor. We're recommending leniency in exchange for full cooperation." "He's not a bad man," Clara said quietly. "He was raised by a monster. He believed what he was told to believe. When he learned the truth, he did the right thing. That's what I told the prosecutor. We'll see what the court decides." Whitmore stood. "We'll be leaving with Mercer tomorrow morning. I'd like you both to come to San Antonio for the trial. Your testimony will be important." "We'll be there," Sam said. Whitmore nodded and left. Clara and Sam stood alone in the sheriff's office, surrounded by papers and evidence, and the weight of everything that had happened. "It's really over," Clara said. "Isn't it? The fighting is over." Sam put his arm around her shoulders. "Everything else is just beginning." They walked out into the afternoon together. The town of Redstone looked different now. Not the buildings, those were the same weathered wooden structures they had always been. But something in the air had changed. The oppressive weight that had hung over everything for so long had lifted, and people moved through the streets with their heads higher, their voices louder, their fear finally beginning to fade. Ruth was waiting for them outside the general store, Billy at her side. "It's done," she asked. "It's done," Clara confirmed. "Whitmore's taking Mercer to San Antonio tomorrow." Ruth closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there were tears on her cheeks. 40 years, she said quietly. 40 years I've watched that man destroy people. Friends, neighbors, Good people who didn't deserve what happened to them. She looked at Clara. You did what none of the rest of us could do. We did it together. No. Ruth shook her head firmly. You started it. You came here with nothing but your husband's notebook and refused to give up. Everything that happened after the evidence the Allies, the courage people found, it all started with you. Clara didn't know what to say. She had never thought of herself as someone who started things. She had always been the one who followed, who supported, who stayed in the background while others led. But maybe that had changed. Maybe she had changed. Ruth, she said, what will you do now? Same thing I've always done. Run my inn. Take care of my people. Ruth smiled slightly. But maybe now I'll do it without looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. You could come visit when Sam and I are settled at the ranch. I'd like that. Ruth reached out and squeezed Clara's hand. You've got a good man there, Clara. Don't let him brood too much. I won't. They said their goodbyes, and Clara and Sam walked toward the edge of town where their horses waited. She's right, you know, Sam said as they walked. About what? About you starting all this. About being the one who refused to give up. He glanced at her. I spent 4 years hiding from the truth about what happened to Margaret. You showed up with that truth in your saddlebag and forced everyone to look at it. Including you. Especially me. Sam stopped walking and turned to face her. I was dead inside Clara. I'd convinced myself that I was fine, that I'd made peace with everything, that my life was exactly what I wanted it to be. But it wasn't peace. It was surrender. And I didn't even know the difference until you came along. Clara reached up and touched his face. Sam, you weren't dead. You were waiting for something worth fighting for. And I found it. He covered her hand with his. Found you. You make it sound like I'm some kind of prize. You're not a prize. You're a partner. Sam's voice was serious now. That's what I want, Clara. Not someone to take care of, not someone to protect, not someone to save. A partner. Someone who stands beside me instead of behind me. Someone who tells me when I'm wrong and fights with me when I'm right. That sounds like a lot of arguing. Probably. The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm counting on it. Clara laughed a real laugh, surprising herself with its brightness. All right, she said. Partners. But I have conditions. Name them. First, we rebuild the cabin on the ridge. Margaret built it for emergencies, and we might need it again someday. Agreed. Second, we help Ruth and Billy and Dr. Cole and everyone else who stood with us. Whatever they need, we're there. Already planned on it. Third, Clara hesitated. Third, we don't forget. Thomas, Margaret, all the others. We don't let their deaths become just stories people tell. We make sure what they sacrificed actually means something. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. I can promise you that, he said. The rest of it, the ranch, the future, whatever comes next, I can't promise any of it will be easy. But I can promise you that I won't forget. And I won't let anyone else forget either. Then we have a deal. They shook hands formally, like two business partners sealing an agreement. Then Sam ruined it by pulling her into a kiss that was considerably less formal. Sorry, he said when they separated. Couldn't help it. Don't apologize. Clara was smiling. I was about to do the same thing. They mounted their horses and rode out of Redstone as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The road ahead was long, and Clara knew there would be more challenges to come. The trial in San Antonio, the rebuilding of lives and trust, the slow work of turning a broken town into something whole again. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Sam, she said as they rode. Yeah. What do you think Thomas would say if he could see all this? Sam considered the question for a moment. I think he'd say it was about time. Clara nodded. That sounded like Thomas. Practical, direct, more concerned with results than with getting credit for them. I think he'd be happy. she said quietly. That the work wasn't wasted. That someone finished what he started. You finished what he started. We did. Clara looked at Sam. All of us. Thomas and Margaret and Ruth and Billy and Dr. Cole and even Elijah in the end. Everyone who refused to look away, even when looking was dangerous. They're all part of this. Then we'll remember all of them. Yes. Clara turned her face toward the setting sun. We will. The ranch was exactly as they had left it, quiet, isolated, waiting. Sam helped Clara down from her horse, and they stood together in the fading light, looking at the place that had been his refuge and was now becoming their home. It needs work, Sam said. The east fence is falling apart, and the barn roof leaks every time it rains, and the well needs to be dug deeper before winter. So we work. It won't be comfortable, not for a while. I don't need comfortable. I need real. Clara took his hand. This is real. You're real. That's enough. Sam looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, the last wall finally coming down, the last defense, finally surrendering. I love you, he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed, like he was saying them for the first time in years. Maybe he was. Clara felt her heart crack open in a way that had nothing to do with pain. I love you too, she said. I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between you letting me sleep in your barn and you shooting the most powerful man in Texas to save my life. But it happened. That's a pretty wide window. It was a complicated few days. Sam laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised and alive. Come on, he said, leading her toward the house. Let's go home. They walked through the door together into the life they were going to build, into the future that had once seemed impossible. Behind them, the sun set on a day that had changed everything. Ahead of them lay all the days that would come after days of work and struggle and ordinary joy. Days of remembering the dead and honoring their memory. Days of learning to trust and love and hope again. Clara McAllister had come to Texas a widow running for her life with nothing but her husband's evidence and a stubborn refusal to give up. She had found something she never expected. Not just justice, not just safety, not just a place to belong. She had found the truth about herself, that she was braver than she knew, stronger than she believed, capable of more than she had ever imagined. And she had found Sam, who had been waiting without knowing it, hiding without realizing it, dying slowly, until she showed up on his porch and made him choose between the safety of solitude and the risk of living again. He had chosen to live. They both had. And in a world full of people who looked away from wrongdoing, who accepted injustice because fighting seemed too hard, who let fear make their choices for them. That simple decision to keep fighting, to keep hoping, to keep loving, despite everything, was the most radical act of all. Clara stood in the doorway of her new home, Sam's arm around her shoulders, and looked out at the Texas evening. Somewhere out there, Thomas was at peace. Margaret was at peace. All the others who had died for the truth were finally at peace. And here, in this small ranch at the edge of nowhere, two people who had lost everything had found something worth more than everything they had lost. Each other. The future. The certain knowledge that some things love justice, the courage to do what's right, were worth any price. Clara McAllister had learned that lesson the hard way. She would never forget it. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure no one else forgot it either. That was her promise. That was her purpose. That was the beginning of everything that came next.